Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, by the time our wonderful listeners listen to this, we should, I think, be in a car on our way to South Bend for the Ohio State Notre Dame game. I personally am excited and looking forward to that. I don't know. I can't speak for you, but it feels like this might be a good and entertaining football game to attend and watch.
You know, me personally, this will be the third trip to Indiana, the state of Indiana. I've had enough. It's enough now, and it's not going to be the last trip. Maybe instead of going through Indiana, what we do, go up through Michigan, but take a boat to the other part to Illinois, come down, just so that it's enough with the state of Indiana. Personally, I'm just saying.
Up through Toledo, up into Michigan, across 94, I think, and then down through, go right all the way across Lake St. Joseph, and then down. Minimize your time in the state of Indiana. I can respect that as a game plan. Yeah, absolutely.
I was told today while picking up a rental car, you don't need to do the toll roads. It only saves you 2 minutes. So, hey, you know what? Wherever you can get tips for a road trip, you take them. But here we are looking at the final preview before our final preview of Ohio State Notre Dame. Number 6 versus number 9. The biggest game of the weekend and the biggest weekend of the year. And this is going to be one that, Tom, I don't know if it's going to wake up the Echoes, but it might cause them to roll over a little bit, get readjusted.
Yeah, the Echoes have been hitting snooze for quite a while. And, I go back to the 90s and early 2000s, and it's you go through every Notre Dame coach this is the guy, because it's always, year 1, year 2, oh man, Tyrone Willingham is 6-0 or 7-0. Charlie Weiss he almost beat USC. This is the guy. And, it's this rite of passage for Notre Dame coaches. And, Brian Kelly, look at how purple he turns. He's the guy. And, Marcus Freeman now, he got off to a dreadful start last year. I mean, they were abysmal at the beginning of last year and got it turned around and had a very solid first year. And now, this does feel like this might be one of the better Notre Dame teams, one of the more complete Notre Dame teams. I think the question is, are they better enough in the spots where they've historically sort of fallen short, quarterback, wide receiver, areas like that? Are they improved enough in those areas to keep up with what should be one of the nation's elite teams, what typically is one of the nation's elite teams? This is going to be a really, really interesting barometer for Notre Dame. If they win, oh man, that you are not going to be able to you are not going to be able to escape Notre Dame fans next week if Notre Dame beats Ohio State for the first time since 1936.
Yeah, I guess I could probably look through Phil Steele and find the last time Notre Dame beat a top 5 opponent. Maybe Clemson in some recent time with Notre Dame's time in the ACC. But you talk about the areas where Notre Dame quite hasn't had the level of talent. Say the offensive line has been pretty good. Maybe the defensive line has had some question marks, and the depth and just the level of athlete has been lacking in a number of areas, and that kind of gets exposed once they are playing those kinds of programs in December and January. Ohio State is one of those programs, but Ohio State has also been a program that has been exposed the last couple of years by Michigan. So if Notre Dame is looking for some proof of concept, they have it. And there are some similarities to what Notre Dame does and what Michigan does, because we could say Michigan doesn't have the most elite wide receivers. Notre Dame doesn't have the most elite wide receivers. They both have decent offensive lines. Michigan's was really good last year and the year before that. Really good running backs. So there's some similarity there that, let's try to do it like Michigan did it. Plus you have a quarterback in Sam Hartman who is, as we've said all week, he's seen everything. There's really nothing he hasn't seen or done or experienced. He hasn't necessarily been in a game like this, but he's been in other big games. He's been, he's bowl games and he's had his back against the wall. Like, look, you're the quarterback of Wake Forest for 4 years. You've been in some situations that were very difficult, hard to win. So, and he's come out of those situations with some wins. So I think there's some things that Notre Dame can look back on at Ohio State and themselves and see plenty of areas where they can have some confidence.
Yeah, it does feel like there are definitely areas where Notre Dame has advantages in this one. And this is, like when we do the Ohio State Michigan Tale of the Tape show, I don't know that I would give Notre Dame the advantage in the majority of positions, but they definitely have the advantage in some positions. And one of the areas where I feel like they have a pretty clear advantage is on the line of scrimmage, at least, in terms of Notre Dame's offensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line. I think that's the offensive line being a concern for Ohio State is, maybe the single biggest thing that kind of gives me pause in terms of which team to pick in this one. Notre Dame has just always been very, very solid along the line of scrimmage. And, even when they've gotten thumped by teams, their offensive line has generally been pretty solid. And it's just a matter of not being able to get stuff to, have the big play guys on the outside to relieve the pressure on the inside of the offense. Joe Alt obviously is a top 10 NFL draft prospect as a left tackle. They're solid at both tackle spots. I have some questions on the interior of the offensive line that we're going to see answered one direction or another on Saturday. And like you said, I think the Michigan comparison is a reasonable one, because I think, if Ohio State loses to Notre Dame, you are going to see some Ohio State fans freaking out about what that means, not only for the season on the whole, but specifically for the Michigan game. And, if Notre Dame can run on them, boy, Michigan should be able to run on them more. And boy, that's going to be a big problem. And, I don't know that that's necessarily unfair, but, there's also a lot of time between now and Thanksgiving. I went back and looked. The last two times that Notre Dame has won a top 10 matchup at home, they beat Clemson in 2020. That was that 47-40 game. They beat a top 10 Stanford team in 2018, 38-17. And before that, you've got to go back to 1993 and the 1-2 game against Florida State, which was the first game ever, Tony. I'm not sure if you knew this. The first time ever College Game Day went on the road. That was for that game on November 13th, 1993. And now, just about 30 years later, College Game Day will once again be back at Notre Dame this weekend.
First time back, really.
They have been to Notre Dame 11 times. Is the note from the Notre Dame media notes this week. This will be the 11th time they will be back. But they don't go to Notre Dame all that often. But when they do, typically tends to be a pretty entertaining game.
We could probably blame Notre Dame for that, USC for that, the downturn that both programs have taken over the last couple of decades at times. Certainly, you'd like to see both of those programs up like they are now, and you'd see more game day situations at the Coliseum and at Notre Dame Stadium. The Michigan thing and the comparison, Tom, Ohio State ran for 143 yards on Michigan last year, 4.9 yards a carry. When I look at this game, I'm trying to imagine what Ohio State looks like running the game. What kind of yardage do they put up? Because I'm not expecting big yards, because we really have no reason to expect them to perform against a very good defense on the ground, because it has been subpar, especially this year. Like 130 some yards against Indiana. There are some questions there. So if I set the over under at 143 yards rushing in this game, because even before that, I was thinking, 135 or something would be maybe a way to set it, but I'll just use the 143 because I don't know that I see Ohio State getting over that.
Yeah, I think if 143 is the number, I'm probably going under, and I'm not going under by a lot, but you give me the band of 20 yards or so from 123 to 143. That seems reasonable, I think. If Ohio State's over 143 yards, I think that, if you're looking at this as Ohio State is a 3-point favorite, so your implied win probability is 55, 45, something like that, maybe not even that high. That might swing it to, if Ohio State is over 143 yards rushing, that might swing it to 60-40 or maybe even a little better than that for Ohio State. And then, if they get to 200 yards, boy, that swings it to about 70-30, 75-25, something like that. I don't think they're going to get there, but if they do, that opens up so many other things in terms of the pass game. And, yes, that's a lot of yards. And yes, that probably is either you're hitting a couple big plays or you're running the ball a lot, which would be a good, if Ohio State runs the ball 40 times, that's probably a real good thing for Ohio State. I guess 40 times. Running the ball 40 times for 143 yards wouldn't be very good. That would be 3.5 yards a carry, which, Ryan Day is not trying to shorten games, is my understanding. So, yeah, but if they have 27 carries for 143 yards, whatever it is, like that's probably a pretty decent sign that they're having a decent day.
Central Michigan went for 131 yards on the ground in 34 attempts last week, 3.9 per carry. I'm not expecting the running game to excel. I think it needs to be a supplement of the passing game. And although if Ohio State has 40 rushes in this game, they win. They have.
Oh yeah.
This game is over. And I don't care if it's for 135 yards. It's that kind of ball control is indicative of everything is 3rd and 1, and you get 2 yards on that 3rd and 1, and then you repeat 4 yards, 2 yards, and boom, first down. 39 minutes of time of possession, perhaps 39 to 46 minutes of time of possession in there. And the Notre Dame Sam Hartman offense is just spending a lot of time throwing the ball on the sidelines, having some Gatorade, maybe a hot dog.
You heard it here first, folks. The return of the 3 yards and a cloud of little rubber pellets offense at Ohio State, exclusive, must credit Buckeye Weekly Podcast.
Well, Ryan Day said, let it rip. Maybe he just meant that's a euphemism for let's just run the ball every time.
If Ohio State is running the ball a lot, if Ohio State runs the ball, what's the magic number where there's almost no scenario where they don't win the game if they run the ball, if they have 35 rushing attempts and it's not like 7 of them are sacks or something like that. If they have like 35 rushing attempts, they almost certainly win the game. And if they have like 15 rushing attempts, they almost certainly lose the game. But like, are there numbers between those where you think, if they rush less than 20 times, that indicates to you there's a big problem?
Yeah, if they're not running the ball 20 times, then either it's because there are a bunch of 1-play, 2-play drives, that sort of thing, and they're hitting some big plays. But if they're in the high 20s to low 30s, I would expect that. But if they're rushing for, say, in terms of a yardage total, when you're talking, I'm thinking 170 yards sounds like a winning number. Something in the 160s sounds like that's much better than expected. It's below your average, even though I don't exactly know what Ohio State's average is at this moment because it's come against such odd teams. It's, so the average isn't really going to be the average just yet. But I think if they hit 170 yards rushing in this game, I'd feel pretty good about Ohio State's chances. And that would include, there's probably going to be a long one in there. Now, if it's 170 yards and there's 2 long ones, now you start to, what's the median carry in there?
Well, yeah, exactly. The median is kind of the interesting question there rather than the mean. But, if you have 2 long runs, unless it's like the Jonathan Wells 76-yarder against Michigan in 1999, where he runs 76 yards, gets tackled at the 5, and then they miss a field goal because it was the 1990s and it was Ohio State and Michigan. Unless you have that, like if you've got 2 80-yard runs for for Travion Henderson or whatever, like, yeah, I think you're probably going to take your chances on that because that gets you. I'm expecting a number in the high 20s or low 30 wins this game. And if you've got 2 of them, if you just tell me 2 plays are going to go for 80-yard touchdowns for Travion Henderson, like, yeah, I think I would take my chances on Ohio State at that point. But, I'm not expecting the distribution of runs to be like that. But if so if they do end up at 170, that's probably really good news. The question, though, Tony, is, they do have some wide receivers they'd like to throw the ball to every once in a while. So what does Kyle McCord look like? What does the offensive line look like in their first real, true, hostile environment test of the year?
Yeah, and this is going to be something that Kyle McCord has not experienced before. He's been on the sideline for big games. He was on the sideline for, the playoff games and the Notre Dame game last year. Interesting, real quick, though, we're talking about 35 carries, 170 yards being a confidence booster. Do you know what they did last year against Notre Dame?
Was it 35 carries, 170 yards?
172. So, and clearly we didn't know that. And it's like, we don't remember that. You just throw out numbers that would be, this might win it. And boom, that certainly did. And that was a team and offense with an established starting quarterback, but there was still some question, just the first game type of thing. What are you going up against? New head coach, new defensive coordinator. So there's some, as they say, the whole feeling out thing, which we would expect in this game in the first quarter as well. But both teams know a lot more about each other. Ohio State knows a lot more about the Notre Dame defense. They also know a lot more about their own offense and what Kyle McCord can do, what they can ask him to do, how he processes things. And I think the confidence that they have in him right now is exactly what you would want for your starting quarterback to go into this game. No, he doesn't have 50 career starts, but he's got a handful now that he has enough to go back on. But the thing that we've heard from his teammates all week is just the demeanor that Kyle McCord has. He's unflappable. Nothing really gets to him. And that is going to be put to a massive test this weekend. And if he stays that way, then that's another check in the Ohio State box about if that happens, then you increase your odds of getting a win.
For sure. And Kyle McCord has been tested like this in the past at lower levels. And it's easy to say, well, how could you compare a high school game to a game of this magnitude at the college level? And, Marvin Harrison told us earlier in the week about a game he played high school, obviously, with Kyle McCord. Not many people know that, but you may hear about that on the broadcast on Saturday. They were high school teammates, and McCord, the first game of his sophomore year, they were playing a nationally ranked team out of Maryland, and Harrison said he was the same dude. He was just kind of calm, unflappable. And when you were a high school sophomore, I can assure you, playing a nationally ranked high school football game, quite possibly on national TV, that is going to feel like the Super Bowl. So, this is someone who has played some big games in the past, and this will obviously be a different kind of challenge. But, Kyle McCord was there for the Michigan game last year. He was there for the Peach Bowl against Georgia. He was there for the whiteout. Was it the whiteout? It wasn't a whiteout last year against Penn State, but the rather hostile atmosphere at Penn State last year. This is not going to be the first time he's been in a loud stadium, and I'm expecting a decent number of Ohio State fans to sort of cut back on the noise a little bit. So, you never know until you see it with a young guy going on the road. And, he was at Indiana earlier in the year. I feel that, and was just kind of okay in week one, but I feel like that had a lot more to do with week one than it did being on the road and playing in front of more people who were cheering for the other team.
Kyle McCord, the passing game, if you're going on the road for the first time in an environment like this, it's nice to have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka to throw to. They'll be going against the number one pass efficiency defense in the nation. And I feel like one of my bold predictions should have been that Kyle McCord will complete more than 50% of his passes, because so far this season, nobody has been able to do that against Notre Dame. Central Michigan completed exactly 50% of their passes. Everybody else has been 22 of 48, 8 of 22, and of course, Navy, 3 of 7. But this is a situation where they've been really, really good against the pass, but they've faced 3 of the worst pass. Well, and Tennessee State being one of those doesn't even count, but they've not faced anything like what they're going to see to this point. But as we talked about on our rewatch of the Notre Dame, North Carolina State, they haven't seen anything like Ohio State will show them, but we've also been impressed by the Notre Dame secondary that we watched.
Yeah, it is a good secondary. It is a veteran secondary. 10 of the 11 starters on defense on the whole are seniors or grad students. And then the one who's not is a sophomore who was a freshman All-American last year. So, it is a well-rounded group that's not going to get, I don't think they're going to be overwhelmed by the Ohio State wide receivers. I think they're going to be challenged by the Ohio State wide receivers, but not necessarily overwhelmed. And this is going to be, Notre Dame has not faced a passing attack remotely like Ohio State's. North Carolina State's passing attack was a mess when they played. And part of that may have been the weather, but part of that is just North Carolina State's wide receivers are just not that good. And Brennan Armstrong was not very good in that game. And, so this is going to be a unique challenge for them, but it's also going to be a unique challenge for Ohio State, who has not faced a secondary that, can those guys run with Ohio State's wide receivers? If they can, and they can keep, they can allocate more resources to the run game, and they don't have to try and double Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison in every play. That makes a very big difference in terms of what this, how this game turns out and whether Ohio State gets to the low 20s or the high 20s or low 30s.
So much of this is going to come down to third downs, red zones. Notre Dame's offense with Sam Hartman, who has, as we've said, he's seen it all. He's done it all. He's a guy that can keep plays alive, but doesn't necessarily need to run. He gets the ball out quickly. He's just the experience that he has, the comfort that he has. You sometimes you have to do different things to impact him. And so it's going to be fascinating to watch the different things that Ohio State does and how much they combine that with just their base defense, the base front four. You bring four. We saw them against North Carolina State having trouble with 3 at times and then at 6 at times, and some of the changing fronts that North Carolina State would throw out there. Jim Knowles, Ohio State defensive coordinator, talked this week about just if you knew the answers on when and how to blitz, you wouldn't have to work as hard. You need to be, he said he'd be smoking a cigar right now, chilling, just, no worries. And this is blitzing and a veteran quarterback is something that you have to be careful doing. It's like, on one hand, you have to do it because he's a veteran quarterback. But on the other hand, be careful because he's a veteran quarterback. Now, with the passing game, they don't really have a go-to guy. And Tom, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Well, it's an interesting thing because the issue with someone like Sam Hartman is not someone who is like last week. Ohio State played Western Kentucky and Austin Reed was back there and it was, 1-2 balls out. Like the ball is out on its way to the receiver and that's it. Hartman seems like he hangs on to the ball more and is just waiting for guys to come open. And I just think that he trusts himself to wait, find room, make a play, find a receiver, and not have to, not have to get the ball out, not panicking. And so that leads you to two kind of different, different thoughts. One is, well, then you need to get him uncomfortable. You need to bring extra pressure. But then if he's so good at surveying down the field, then you don't want to bring extra pressure because that just means one of those guys can be open. And that North Carolina State game, it's not like they hit a bunch of, balls that were 60 yards in the air. It was a bunch of 15-yard crosser that goes for 45, a little 8-yard dump off along the sideline that goes for 50. It's the yards after catch that get you. And that's the issue with a veteran quarterback is he will sit there, he will be patient, he will find the holes in your zone or the guy in man coverage who gets lost, hit that guy, get the ball to one of his guys in space, and let them try and make a lot more out of it than you did just with the ball in the air.
And they'll have their running game to rely on, and running back Audric Estime, who is, I believe, second in the nation in yards rushing per game at 130 yards per game, averaging a respectable 8.3 yards per carry. Had the 80-yarder. It's not bad. It had the 80-yarder against North Carolina State to start the second quarter, and is not necessarily a big play guy. Wasn't last year, but has become a bigger play guy this year. But most of those plays, that's not his thing. And so when he's had more than 620-yard carries this season already. He had 7 last year, but only one of those have come against a Power 5 opponent, which was the 80-yarder against North Carolina State. So it's not really his game. His game is just keeping Notre Dame on schedule. But he's got some wiggle for as big as he is. He's hard to bring down. He's a guy that you have to take seriously. He's not going to tackle himself like some guys that they just don't pick up their feet. He's a guy that I like, but he's also a guy that I think he's a guy that linebackers like as well, because there isn't necessarily going to be a bunch of whiffing. You may get run over, but at least you hit the mark,
Yeah, I mean, 5'11 and a half, 227 pounds. He's the size of a linebacker. So, he's not going to run away from you. I don't know if linebackers like getting run over. I mean, maybe they do. Linebackers are a little nuts, but, he's not, I know he hit an 80-yarder against North Carolina State, but he's not the kind of guy you expect to see hit 3 40-yard runs or something like that during the course of a game. He's the kind of guy that you feel like is going to pick up 7 yards when they need 5, or pick up 5 yards when they need 3. That's the kind of annoying that he is, rather than a really big playback. But he's also, he is also the kind of guy where if you need to, the Buckeyes talked earlier in the week about the fact you've got to gang tackle, you rally to the ball, you've got to get him to the ground. You can't give up, yards after contact. And if you're rallying the ball and you're just a little bit too aggressive, that's when you get popped over the top with a play action pass. Josh Proctor is one of those guys who I'm really kind of keeping an eye on, because he's someone who, if Notre Dame is really run heavy, Josh Proctor could play a really big role in that run defense and come crashing downhill to make plays close to the line of scrimmage. But man, you better be right if you're going to do that, because you slip a tight end or someone behind the linebacker, and all of a sudden there's a lot of room to run if you bite too hard on play action. Yeah,
that's going to be one that I'm watching constantly. And you can throw Lathan Ransom, the other safety, in there as well. Of course, what does Sonny Styles? His role will probably be larger this week because Notre Dame will play 2 tight ends, and they will be running the ball with a heavy running back. And so you'll want as much size as possible in there while still being flexible enough to defend the pass. And that's the entire reason you have Sonny Styles on the field, is so that he can help out as a Sam and then also cover a tight end or a slot receiver as a nickel. So that's going to be something to watch. I am interested also to see Mike Hall, who had a really good game last year as a pass rusher and getting into the backfield. We'll see this year if is 280 pounds not enough for a nose tackle against a Notre Dame offensive line like this and a running back like this. Can he hold up? Not that he's going to need to play 50 snaps, but what does that interior look like for Ohio State, and how well do they hold up? I don't think it's going to be easy to run, but Notre Dame isn't going to give up on it either.
No, I think you're going to see I think, it's in their best interest to establish the run, because then if they can get the run established, and, you don't have to run for 8 yards a carry or whatever. You've got to run for 4.5 or 5 yards a carry. If you're running for 5 yards a carry for Notre Dame, that is not crazy huge numbers, but that's enough that then Ohio State has to dedicate more to the run, and you're staying on schedule, and that's when you do end up opening things up to pop something over the top. And I think Notre Dame's going to maybe have the advantage on the edges on the offensive line. I feels like Ohio State might hold up pretty well in the interior of that defensive line. Like, the interior of the Notre Dame offensive line is not as strong as Joe Alt and Blake Fisher on the outside. I think you may have an opportunity, and if you can get pressure up the middle, boy, that changes things quite a bit. That limits your run game. That makes you, then the running back has to spill outside, and then that's when Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers get involved. And if Ohio State is solid in the middle of the defensive line, that's going to be one of the really, really big factors in determining how this game goes.
So let's get to our picks. Tom, earlier in the week, I said in my head, I had 27-23 Ohio State. And then I saw an analytics breakdown that had it 27-23 Ohio State. Buckeyes are favored by 3.5. I like the 27-23. I think whoever kicks more field goals loses. You're losing in the red zone. So I'm seeing Ohio State with 2 field goals, Notre Dame with 3, hence victory for Ohio State.
Yeah, I have not put my score prediction in, but all week I've just kind of had this weird feeling around like 28-27 Ohio State. And this is not a game where I would be remotely surprised if Notre Dame won. Nope. Notre Dame has not won this type of game for the most part over the last few years. They beat Clemson a few years ago, but just in general, when you're playing the Ohio States and the Georgias and the Alabamas, it just doesn't happen for them for some of the reasons we laid out earlier in the show. This is an Ohio State team that is not yet in its final form, and you might be catching them early enough that you can kind of, an Ohio State team in week 4 with a young quarterback. You want to catch them then if you're the team with the veteran quarterback and the veteran defense, because I think Ohio State's going to be substantially better by the time late October, November rolls around. I feel like I kind of have to see it. Like, I know, like Jaden Greathouse, I know, true freshman wide receiver for Notre Dame. Like, I know they like him a lot. I think they think he might be a difference maker. When your leading receiver against North Carolina State is a tight end, I still kind of go, yeah, this still sort of looks like the Notre Dame that's just kind of missing the pieces outside to have the kind of explosive offense you might need to keep up with a team that has Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming. I think Ohio State's going to be able to do just enough. And like you said, maybe hold Notre Dame to a field goal or two in the red zone, and 28-27 Ohio State.
Well, there you have it. So we have plenty of stuff scheduled for this weekend. So make sure, if you haven't liked this video, go do it now. Subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when we go live, because we're going to be doing some things, plenty of stuff in South Bend while we were there. So we'll be dropping some videos, podcasts as well. So just do all of that to be notified when we do that. So I want to thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.